Hello, and thank you for joining me today as we continue our discussion on the nervous system. So today we're going to talk about the brain, the different hemispheres of the brain, and the parts including the diencephalon, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. So to start with, your brain is made of two hemispheres. You have a left and right hemisphere. And each one of these, so we have what we consider left brain people and right brain people. We're talking about these hemispheres. 90% of the population, roughly, have a left side dominance as far as their brain goes, brain function. So some traits and characteristics of left side dominance is you have a dominance, you're more inclined or in tune to language related activities for speech, writing, and reading. And you are more complex intellectual function requiring you do verbal, analytical, and computational skill really well. So right-handed people, if you are right-handed, 90% of them are left-hand dominant, 10% are right-hand dominant, or left brain dominant. Sorry, right-handed people, 90% are left brain dominant, 10% are right brain dominant. Left-handed people are roughly 64% left brain, 20% right brain, and 16 have kind of this co-dominance that they function really well, kind of all around. Your right hemisphere functions in nonverbal communication, orienting the body in space. So if you're right brain dominant, reading nonverbal communication, orienting your body in space, spatial awareness, typically more artistic musical patterns, visual experiences, more emotional and intuitive thought processes and thinking. More geared toward the artsy side is one way to look at it. Left brain people are very factual, very straight to the point, math inclined people. So a lot of computer whizzes and math people are left brain dominant. They like black and white, straightforward, and it's cut and dry. As far as your brain goes, we talk about memory. So your brain stores memories, and you have different levels of memory. So you have a short term, you have a working memory, and this short term memory is only present when you have electrical circuit of nerves, when this electrical connection is present. So your electrical circuit of nerves is working, you have this short-term memory. You're trying to remember a phone number. You can remember for a short period of time because those nerves are constantly firing. But as soon as that electrical connection is lost, your memory is lost. And so you might not remember that phone number again. These are very fluid connections, meaning they come and go. They happen and then they disappear. And it happens all the time. Your long-term memory is structurally different. This is a more permanent connection. So you have, so long-term means permanent, that you remember things your entire life. So you have approximately 10 billion neurons in your brain, and each of these can make tens of thousands of connections. And you can have trillions and trillions of synapses or connections there. So if each of your 10 billion form thousands of connections, you get a very large number of synapses or connections or pathways. And so every time you stimulate this same connection, the stronger the connection is, the easier to stimulate. For example, I assimilate it to driving a car. If you drive somewhere for the first time, you might have Google Maps out, you might take a while, and you're very cautious about where you're going. Next time, a little more confident, get there a little quicker, more comfortable going there, I'm not as nervous. Drive it 100 times, by that 100th time, you're getting there pretty easy. It's where you grew up, your path home, you can drive with your eyes closed. This is, you just built that connection, you burned it in. The more times you stimulate it, the stronger that connection gets, it's easier to go back to. And so the more often you do things, the easier it is to repeat. And this is why repetition is the key to learning. So this is why in my class we do a ton of practice. And you get sick of practicing. But I don't want you to practice till you get it right. I want you to practice till you can't get it wrong. Repetition is the key to learning. And you can't learn without repeating things and practicing things and going over them again. Because what you're doing is you are strengthening this connection. You're burning this connection in. You're making this connection something that happens subconsciously. You don't have to think about it. It just happens. Okay, let's talk parts of the brain. In the middle of your brain, you have this region called the diencephalon. This is located between your hemispheres and above the brainstem, which we'll talk about next. So this diencephalon is this little region here, and we're going to talk about that right now. So this whole piece is your diencephalon, which includes, so this is your spinal cord, and this goes into your brainstem. Your diencephalon sits above there. So this is right in the center of your brain, but you have all sorts of branches coming off of this point. And there's just a whole, your ventricles, so your third ventricle here supplies cerebrospinal fluid. You have an optic nerve, which is sight. Your pituitary gland controls a lot of functions of your body. Your pons have their own function, which we'll talk about. Your fourth ventricle, again, cerebrospinal fluid. Your medulla oblongata, we're going to talk about in this slide. All of these happen here. Your thalamus, we're going to talk about also. So these are all found in what's called your diencephalon. So this region, the two main components are called the thalamus and the hypothalamus. So your thalamus transmits sensory information. So you have senses, your 5 senses send information to your brain. They come to the thalamus, and this sends it out where it needs to go to be interpreted. Hey, this came from this region of the body, this stimulus, so this is where I'm going to send it to figure out what it means. Your hypothalamus is a major control center. So it controls a large number of things, such as your heart rate and blood pressure. It controls your body temperature. So if you are warm, it will increase your heart rate to get heat away from your core so it can be released to the outside world. Water and electrolyte balance. Water and electrolyte balance. It controls your hunger and your body weight. It controls your movements, your granular secretions, stomach and intestines. And it controls your sleeping and your waking. Produces hormones from production hormones from the pituitary gland. So it controls that pituitary gland we talked about that produces a bunch of hormones and secretions in your body. That's controlled by your hypothalamus, along with your other glands and reproductive organs. This diencephalon is also known as your limbic system. This combination of thalamus, hypothalamus is also known as your limbic system. And so if you go into the medical field, you will reference it that way to talk about kind of the whole system. So again, all parts make up the limbic system. So all parts of your diencephalon make up your limbic system. And this is responsible for functions in emotional experiences and expressions. Produces emotions. So this is where it's kind of your emotional control center. Things like fear, anger, pleasure, happiness, and sorrow are all controlled here. This is where those emotions are stimulated from, and this is how your body reacts to them. We talk just inferior to your diencephalon is your brainstem. This connects your spinal cord to the rest of your brain. Some parts of your brainstem include the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So this is your spinal cord coming up. Your brainstem begins here with your medulla. The pons are next, and your midbrain is just below your diencephalon, which is your thalamus, hypothalamus. And then this region here is called your corpus callosum. This is, again, your nerve highway between your two hemispheres. So your diencephalon sits just inferior to that, just below that, and then this is your brain on top. If we're looking at the brainstem, so we said it connects the brain to the spinal cord. Your midbrain is your reflex center. So your brain controls a lot of functions in your body. There are some that can happen without your brain consciously controlling them. And one of those is your reflexes. So, for example, you go to the doctor, you sit on the table, they hit your knee, and you kick out. That signal never reaches your brain, your cerebrum brain. It gets to your midbrain. That one doesn't even get there. But the reflex center, that your knee-jerk reflexes, for example, you touch a hot stove, that might get to your midbrain, and then you pull back because it didn't have to go to where, oh, this is hot. You pull back before you know it's hot. Your pons are also there, and they have their own function. But then your medulla oblongata has a larger function. So your medulla is your cardiac center. This controls your heart rate. So if your heart rate increases, that's controlled by your medulla oblongata. Heart rate decreases, same thing. It's your vasomotor center. So along with heart rate, it controls your blood vessel diameter. So we have vasoconstriction, which is when your blood vessels constrict and contract to decrease the amount of blood that flows through. For example, if you're cold, your body will decrease the blood vessel size in your limbs. It decreases from farthest out to the middle. It wants to concentrate all of that blood in your core to keep your core warm. That's why your fingers and toes typically get cold first, is because of this vasoconstriction. It also functions in vasodilation. And so if you are really warm, your body will vasodilate. Your blood vessels will get bigger to take more blood to the outside to carry more energy and heat away from your heart and to drop your core your core body temp. So along with constricting and relaxing, along with taking heat in and out, you can change your blood pressure accordingly. That if your blood vessels get smaller, your blood pressure goes up. Blood vessels get bigger, blood pressure goes down. So those all work congruently, and that's all controlled by your medulla oblongata. The last thing it controls is your breathing. We talked a little bit about this when we talked the respiratory system, but this controls your breathing, regulates your rhythm, your rates, and the depth of your breathing. So people that hyperventilate, that's controlled here. But your breathing patterns are controlled in your medulla oblongata. The last little bit we're going to talk about today is your cerebellum. This is the back portion of your brain, this bottom little piece connected, it's right below your cerebrum, which is the big part we talked about. So your cerebellum also has two hemispheres. This is your sensory information integration center, especially concerning position and body parts. And it coordinates your skeletal muscle activity. This is your orientation in space. So this is your body position in space, controls that. Also deals with vision. So this, again, we talked, if you get hit in the back of the head, your eyes go blurry, that's because your cerebellum was contacted and your vision center was disturbed, at least temporarily. So one of the ways you can test your cerebellum to see how good you are at controlling these different things is you can stand up, close your eyes, put your arms out wide, and see if you can touch your nose. So bring both hands, touch your nose. See how hard it is to hit your nose exactly without seeing it. That's your cerebellum controlling that. You can also do it standing on one foot and do the same thing. Do it with your eyes closed. So stand on one foot with your eyes closed, touch your nose with both hands, one at a time, and see how things work there. That's a way you can test your cerebellum and your function there. But that is today's lecture on different hemispheres of the brain, along with the limbic system, your brainstem, and your cerebellum. So work through these review questions, and I will see you tomorrow.